So, guess what? You don't have to guess. We're in another book. The book of Judges. The book of Judges doesn't start out at a low point. Kind of a high point with Joshua, Caleb. But by the time we're done with the book of Judges, you're going to see Israel at their low, get to really low points. From the great victories under Joshua to being enslaved by the very people they were to conquer at times. I know we had 5 chapters, and the lesson commentary dials in on Deborah. Probably the highlight, her and her song, of the book of Judges. But God used those judges to deliver his people. It's what the book of Judges are about. It's about a man or a woman, mostly men, whom God would use or empower. I guess everybody heard that. Was that behind me? Oh. To empower. God empowered men. God did it. God did the empowering. It was by God's power through certain men that he would judge and take care of his people. A lot of the commentaries that I read, just the introduction by scholars of the book of Judges, they come down pretty hard on them judges. A little bit too hard for my taste. They were, God chose those men. He used those men. And you know what? It's easy to sit and judge those men sitting in your desk reading your little commentaries in front of your little air conditioning room in your little United States of America, the greatest nation on earth. More peace here in America than there's ever been in any country in the world. So it's easy to condemn those guys. Some commentaries called some of them cowards. Come on, man. They weren't cowards. Sometimes we don't do what God wants us to do because we just don't know what he wants us to do. Sometimes we're just ignorant, going through life, happy as a lark. And God chose judges out of that bunch of people to do that. They weren't perfect, but the commentators of the commentaries that we read, they're not perfect either. It's like they forget that. What would you do, commentator, if you was back then in those days, living under Philistine rule, or Canaanite rule, or Hittite rule, kill or be killed? What would you do, if you didn't have anything to eat and you was a slave? What would you do? It's easy to sit at a desk and write a commentary and make claims about people when you have never been there. You've never walked a mile in their shoes. They weren't perfect men, but you know what they were? Men. And God worked through those particular men, those particular judges. Our quarterly focuses on Deborah, but I don't know how much we'll get in on her today. I did take some notes. Took some notes on Judges 1, chapter 1 through chapter 5:31. And I'm going to go over them all, but it's just one page, so we can't be here too long, huh? I'm going to start taking it a little more easy in Sunday school classes, give me more oxygen for the sermon. Y'all looking forward to the book of Judges? Finally out of the book of Joshua? We're rolling through the books, aren't we? They bit off 5 chapters of it for us to chew on. Of course, if you go through and you read it real slow, verse by verse, there's a sermon every few verses, 45-minute sermon. But we're going to try to do 5 chapters of the book of Judges. And you know, I want to point this out. If I got my math correct, United States of America, as we know it today, is 246 years old. Is that right? Since 1776, July 4th. The period of Judges was 330 years. So we haven't been in America as long as the Israelites were in the Promised Land under Judges. You know, from Joshua to the first king, Saul, was about, if the math is right, you know, y'all know I'm not good at any math or anything, about 330 years. Has America got 330 years left in her? Or not left in her, but have we got 330 years? Wow. I watch on YouTube, just to make myself feel smart once in a while, these guys that ask these X-generation kids questions and look for, you know, the answer, like how many states or how many stars are on the American flag. Does everybody know that? Do you not believe how many X-gens don't know that? 47? 53? I don't know. And, you know, how many nations are on, what nations border the United States of America? Is it Germany? So you got to wonder, you know, that's not my kids, but that's their kids. My kids' kids. Well, no, it's 30-year-olds and down who don't even know how many stars are on the flag. Who knocked down the World Trade Centers? Was it the Russians? So that's quick. They don't even know who knocked down the World Trade Centers. We all know it's Osama bin Laden and his bunch, terrorists, Islamic terrorists. Well, see, when I hear them sort of questions not being answered, that sort of silliness. Well, guess who's going to be running for Senate one of these days? You got to wonder sometimes if there ain't already senators and congressmen who are like that already in office. Boy, I'd hate for that guy to go through Congress asking some of them junior Congress members questions like that. I don't know if my heart wouldn't be able to take that if they did that. So we're 246 years along. Israel had about 330 years of judges before a king finally came along. But so that kind of puts it in the ballpark of time, how long things last. I think America's had a pretty good run, really. World War, how many major wars we had? The Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War I, World War II. I don't know about the wars after that, are just kind of strange. Had a pretty good run right here in the United States of America. Churches at one time in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s were packed. Missionary Baptist churches, and I expect all of them were, all of the denominations. Well, it's not so anymore. So it makes me wonder how the next few years is going to be right here in America. But one thing you can count on, whether you're American or you were a Jew living under these judges, God takes care of business one way or another, period. Nothing is without, there's nothing that's away from his grasp, nothing. He's seen it all. So I just thought I would point that out. 330 years from Joshua to King Saul. In America, we're 246 years along, and I don't know. Are we a godly country? I don't think so. Do we trust in God today? You know, them guys ask those kids questions, you know, about historical things. They don't ask them anything about spiritual things, about God or church or, you know what? So have y'all heard of the Kardashian family? Can you name them? They'd ask those, you know, how many stars on the flag? I don't know. Can you name the Kardashians? Bam, 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 bam. They spit them out so fast. I don't even know. I couldn't name any of them, I don't think. So they're into the pop culture, but history means nothing to them. So we're not Israel. America's never been Israel. America's never been God's people like Israel were, ever. In God we trust is on a dollar bill with the same pyramid that of the worship of Baal. That's right over that. The obelisks. That's all pagan worship stuff. So in God we trust. Nice try. You want to worship God, you do it spirit and in truth. You can't do one without the other. You can't be spiritual without the truth. THE. What do we call that? Definite article. You can't serve the Lord without the truth, and you can't be spiritual without the truth. You can't be spiritual without the truth. And how much of that truth is in the world today? I mean, so here we are getting into the book of Judges. Judges chapter 1, you don't have to turn there. Yeah. How about we turn there? Judges chapter 1. I normally print the verses out I'm going to read, but I didn't. Can't see my Bible very good, so I might have to get somebody to read for me. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 20 is kind of a finish up of Caleb and the tribe of Judah. You start thinking about Caleb, you think of Joshua and Caleb, how great they were. But I don't think Caleb was a administrative type. He was more of a foreman type. The foreman, he don't want anything to do with the administration. Just point me in the job, give me the crew, and we'll go do it. That's the way Caleb was. Get her done type deal, but he wasn't much of an administrator apparently. So they kind of finish up with Caleb and the tribe of Judah. Terry, if you don't mind read verses 1 and 2.
Now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites first to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have delivered the land into his hand.
Who was Judah? Do y'all know who Judah was? Judah was one of the 12 sons of who? You think he was alive in these days? No. He was a goner. But he said Judah shall come up. So what do we think that means? The tribe of Judah. But he don't name a guy, does he? He just says the tribe of Judah. Judah shall go up. That tribe right there. It's their time. They're going to do their thing. And you don't hear much negative things about the tribe of Judah through the book of Judges, like you do some of these. But can you read 13 or 12 and 13?
And Caleb said, He that smiteth Kirjath-sepher and taketh it, to him will I give Achsah, my daughter, to wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it, and he gave him Achsah, his daughter, to wife.
So I kind of got to finish up there of Caleb. So y'all know the story of what happened there with him and his brother and his daughter. And but Caleb's still throwing down, 85 years old. He is still getting after it. So kind of in the Judges, in chapter 1, you kind of finish up with, not quite, but with Joshua and Caleb. In verse 21 of this chapter, Terry, I'm going to be calling on you to read again. You find a little bit about Benjamin. Y'all know who Benjamin was, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. So the 12 tribes of Israel. So, all right, Benjamin, what does it say about Benjamin in 21?
Just 21.
Yeah.
And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem unto this day.
So, kind of get an idea of where things are going with the children of Israel, right? The tribe of Joseph, 22 through 25. Terry, you want to read, or you want to let somebody else read? Because I'm going to have you read from the pulpit this morning.
I don't care.
Go ahead and read it.
And the house of Joseph, they also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph sent to descry Bethel. Now the name of the city before was Luz. And the spies saw a man come forth out of the city, and they said unto him, Show us, we pray thee, the entrance into the city, and we will show thee mercy. And when he showed them the entrance into the city, they smote the city with the edge of the sword, but they let go the man and all his family.
All right, so we've got a wrapping up or culminations of the children of Israel doing or not doing in the first chapter of Judges what God wanted them to do. So we got through Joseph. We got Manasseh, verse 27. Go ahead and read that for me.
Neither did Manasseh drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean and her towns, nor Tanakh and her towns, nor the inhabitants of Dor and her towns, nor the inhabitants of Ibleam and her towns, nor the inhabitants of Megiddo and her towns, but the Canaanites would dwell in that land.
What in the world's going on? I mean, God's people were all doing good. All of a sudden, wham! They just weren't able to do what God told them to do. What do y'all think happened? Were they able? I think one thing we've learned from this, they were never able. God did it for them. They stopped counting on God or something. They started looking at these things through worldly eyes and worldly ways, and they stopped looking at God and remembering what God had done for them. You know, it hadn't been too long ago that he stopped up 20 years, that's probably how long it was, that he had stopped the Jordan River and the walls fell down flat at Jericho. It hadn't been too long, but how easy people forget. I'm in my early 50s, but I remember church when I was a kid. I remember going to church, Sunday schools, and youth meetings, and youth rallies, and I think we had 2 or 3 revivals a year, and packed those houses, and the singing and the choir was full, and here we are just a few years later. Do our kids know anything about that? All they know is the stories we might have told them. And the stories we tell, to them, are they real or not? Well, Mom and Dad said so. But it's not really real to them. But what in the world happened? I think we're going to learn, if I live long enough to preach it, through the book of Revelation, that men are just failures, period. Why? Because we're in the flesh. In my flesh, what Paul says, I think, is dwells no good thing. Start living in the flesh and downhill from there. We're going to learn that Jesus himself is going to set up a kingdom on this earth. Himself. And you know what happens at the end of that? Give it one of those. The Lord's kingdom. He personally started himself. Rules and reigns from Israel for 1,000 years. What happens? Goes to hell. You know why? Because it's made up of human beings. Are you a human being or not? Are you capable of forgetting? Are you capable of backsliding? Are you capable of living a sinful life? Can you do it? Yeah, sure we can live a spiritual life, but are we not capable? You see it right here in Judges. All right. Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali. We can't leave them out. How about that? Verses 28 through 34, Terry.
And it came to pass when Israel was strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute and did not utterly drive them out. Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites that dwell in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelt in Gezer among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the inhabitants of Kitron, nor the inhabitants of Nahalol, but the Canaanites dwelt among them and became tributaries. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Acco, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Elab, nor of Achzib, nor of Helba, nor of Aphek, nor of Rehob. But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Bethanah, but he dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and of Bethanah became tributaries unto them. And the Amorites forced the children of Dan into the mountain, for they would not suffer them to come down to the valley.
Yeah, that just kind of finishes up with the 12 tribes of Israel in chapter 1. Not a high note. Did y'all agree that? And the high notes ended with Joshua. Doesn't it seem that way? As long as Joshua was around. And now, instead of driving them out, I think they would put a hurting on these people, but then they would, instead of driving them completely out, start taxing them. Why drive them out? There's money to be made. Start taxing them. So they weren't driving out the inhabitants. They kind of give up on that and stop doing what they were supposed to do. And then God would raise up judges. You might say Joshua and Caleb were the first judges, you might say, over there in the land of Canaan. So that's chapter 1 of Judges. Now we got several more chapters to go. Let me read you something on chapter 2 that I read from the commentary. Joshua to Judges. Godly influence will have a lasting effect, at minimum, a generation. That's Joshua 2, 1 through 9. We're not going to read it. At least a minimum of generation. So that to me is like saying, the world's gone haywire, gone nuts. It's a godless world, an ungodly world. But there's a generation following you. Forget it. I don't know what's going to happen to America if it's around for 330 years like Israel was during I don't know. But there's a generation coming up behind me. I can serve the Lord at least for them. You know what I'm saying? And one generation at a time. I don't know what you would consider. I don't know how you would consider your generation. All I know is mine. My memories might be different than yours, but it's a different world we live in. I look back I just told you about my generation, how about what I remember about church and how they were, that was in the 70s and 80s. And after that, that's when they started peeling off. Well, my graduation was in 1985. So, I don't know. So, you know what? I can't make my kids be like my generation. That don't work, and a lot of people try that. Try to make their kids be like make their lives like their lives were when they were. Now it don't work. They're a different generation. The things I see on going on in the world today with the X-Gen. Well, I got 2 little grandsons. 1 and 4, 1 and 3, something like that. That's going to be normal to them. That stuff that that stuff that cracks us up, like, what's wrong with the next gen? That's going to be normal to them. That's their generation. That's the generation they grow up in. So the best that I can do, Grandpa, as a father, the best that I can do is trust in the Lord. And I ain't saying I need to go around saying praise Jesus. That's a lot of that going on. A lot of people do that who don't darken the door of a church. Praise God. I just love Jesus, but they won't go to church. The best I can do, y'all, as a grandpa, is praise the Lord, but put my money where my mouth is. Go to church. I'm a preacher. Best thing I can do as a preacher, put my money where my mouth is study and preach. And just do that. And let the chips fall where they may, and let God deal with the next generation. I can only deal with mine. I can't go back and fix the generation before me, and I can't fix the generation that's coming after me. But all I can do is what God called me to do. And do I feel miserably at that? Sure. That's why I have a church. Y'all take up my slack. That's what I like about church. They take up the slack of each other. That's what they should do, shouldn't they? When one's up, when one's down, there's others that are up. And when those that are up go down, that one who's been down, he generally finds his way up, and God does all that. And that's how we serve our generation. And the generation that follows observes that. Don't know what they're going to do. Don't know. You see how quickly things got out of hand here in the Judges with the children of Israel. You see how quick it happened. I mean, Joshua he probably still had flesh on the bones in his grave. He hadn't even rotted yet before they went haywire. But the best that we can do, like Joshua and Caleb, is just serve. Let God deal with that next generation. He does. He will, according to what they know. It's like my son. He don't know what I know. He don't know what I know. He hasn't experienced what I have experienced when it comes to church. He don't know anything about that. When I was a kid, every Sunday the preacher would preach, the pianist would get up there, and the altar would fill up with people. You know what I'm talking about? That'd probably scare a kid half to death. What's wrong with people? See that nowadays. But just focus on God and the victories that God has given you and me in my life. And promote that. That generation is coming, we'll see that. I don't know how much they see or how much they know. But God will deal. He dealt for 330 years through the book of Judges. We'll get to it. Hopefully. We might as well, we better get to some Judges, being how we're talking about Judges today, huh? We're not going to read it, but Judges chapter 3 through 31, we have Othniel. That was one of the judges of Israel, versus the Mesopotamians. That's who he dealt with. That's who were giving Israel problems in Othniel, the very first judge's day. That's who the big problem was. You know where the Mesopotamians were? That's plumb across. That is where Abraham was from. Plumb across, way over there at the Euphrates River. Now this judge was dealing with those guys, Mesopotamians. He was protecting. God used this man to judge Israel and protect them from Mesopotamians. Then we have another guy named Ehud, another judge. Y'all, he fought and judged and protected Israel against Moabites. Now we've got the first judge taking on Mesopotamians. And then we got Ehud comes along, the second judge. He's fighting Moabites. You know where they are? Excuse me. Right down here. There's where Moabites are from. That's not even in Israel. What are these guys doing over here in Israel? These Moabites. Well, this is who Ehud was taking on the Moabites that come from down there. And then we have one of my favorite judges. His name was Shamgar. This is all in chapter 3. He's the one who fought and killed and slew 600 Philistines with and ox goad. Now I don't know that Shamgar went out in one battle and killed 600 men, or over his lifetime killed 600 men, but he did it with an ox goad. Bible don't say anything about it. By the way, here's where the Philistines are from. Right here. You know where they were from? The Philistines? Greeks. They were Greeks. They inhabited this over here, ancient days, became the Philistines. So the first three judges dealt with Philistines, Moabites, and Mesopotamians. Doesn't say anything about Canaanites for those first ones, does it? So the book of Judges is an interesting book. That's in chapter 3. And then chapter 4 is what the Sunday school lesson dialed in on, Deborah and Barak versus the Canaanites. Y'all know Deborah was the only female judge. She was a prophetess. I'm not sure what that means. Either she was the daughter of a prophet or the wife of one. I don't know, but she was one or the other. And she judged Israel. Now, I don't think Deborah went down and threw down with anybody personally. She was a woman. But she led armies. She led armies through another judge, Deborah and Barak, who fought the Canaanites. I've been looking at the Canaanites a little. I thought, how am I going to talk about the Canaanites in this day and age, this political correct day and age? You know what they were? I'll just say this. They were a race. All the other Perizzites and the Jebusites and all those sites. The Canaanites were a race of people. Use your imagination on who they were. But they were of the children of Ham. Remember Canaan? God cursed Ham and Canaan's children. Remember what Ham, probably Canaan, not Ham, but Canaan did to Noah way back after the flood. So Deborah, the next judge, and Barak fought with the Canaanites. And we're not going to get to it because of time. It's a pretty good read. And then you have a song of Deborah. A song she wrote. It was a good song. And I'm sure y'all might have read the lesson on Deborah. Did y'all pick up on how vicious and cruel life was in those days? The battle they fought ended with another woman, driving a stake through the side of a man's head and pinning it to the ground. That, brethren, is harsh. And now, do you want to be hard on it? What kind of world was that? Yeah, come on in here. I'll take care of you. Yeah, she did. With a hammer and a nail. That, my friend, was a terrible world they live in. Now, how bad can we get right here in America? I think it can turn bad, y'all. I don't think our generation will see it. I'm hoping the Lord, returns and says, you know what? Mankind's done. Here comes the millennial kingdom. That's what I'm hoping for. But if it don't, what can America become? I don't know about the rest of the world. I've never even been out of the country of America. I've never been to Canada. I've never been to Mexico. So what can become of us? So does anybody have a comment about the book of Judges, about Deborah, Barak? There's more judges to come. Just keep in mind when you read about these guys, they were human beings like the rest of us. And you probably need to grow up in a time where a woman can take a stake and drive it through a man's head and get applauded. Now, in this day, and you do that in this day and age, something's weird. So put yourself in their shoes. God took care of them, the children of Israel. They stopped doing what they were supposed to do, yet God took care of them every time anyway. It's about 15 till.